where we've done whole house. Are we okay? Where we've done a lot of whole house projects, and we've done sites, we've done neighbouring sites, we've rolled out as a whole programme, which, like I say, I'm probably preaching to the converted because you guys have done this as well. But I thought for the purposes today, I'd cover a few more things. So we've got three projects here, which I won't go through in lots of detail, but just to give you a bit of an overview. The bottom one, I think, is actually one that the TPAS team have covered. It's one of our properties that a new build property, so not retrofit. But the reason I included it is because we've now installed next gen into some of our new builds as well, which has come as a result of the work that we've done from retrofit. Obviously, you're as the same as us, I'm sure, want if you've got a internal maintenance team or even contracted maintenance services, are going to want to try and keep some consistency of products for the staff training, knowledge, parts, etc. So the reason I've included this one, and although it's not retrofit, is that we've now started rolling out the same products in the same way as we're doing on the retrofit. So the property at the bottom was 8 properties, absolute new build, which have had the solar PV, mixergy tank, and also the next gen. In the top corner, the lovely, more historic looking building, we worked with Torvine Council and renovated an old listed building within a conservation area. To turn it into apartments. So as you can see from the picture there, the internals had to remain the same. Things like the banisters, the hallway, the flooring. It was absolute huge levels of listing and conservation, with from balconies to everything that was wonderful and everything that caused the biggest challenge in the world for our development team who delivered this. But it was a retrofit, and we've put infrared, not the next gen, but infrared panels in there, a sole shear system on the roof, and mixergy tanks again. So it's just a bit of an example. Happy to share more information at a later date, or our team, the development team, can if anybody wants to know any more. But it was a really good example of how we were going to retrofit an existing, very challenging building, but still ensure that we made sure that we put as much decarb as possible within it. Things like triple glazing windows was never going to happen. The windows are obviously absolutely delightful and a huge part in the building. So we had to focus on the inside. So these homes are now up and ready, 8 apartments with people already living in them. So we're going to get feedback from the monitoring to understand exactly how the retrofit works in such a challenging building as the residents are living in there. So haven't got that data at the moment because it's very recently been tenanted, but happy to share that again. And then the other thing I wanted to raise around retrofit was, so the bottom right corner, I didn't have a finished picture, unfortunately, but this is one of our void properties. So the approach we've taken, apart from doing whole site approach, is products such as next gen and lots of the others are quite disruptive. There's no getting around it. It does involve residents' furniture being moved. It does involve redecoration. It does involve a huge impact on them, on our residents. And we can't underestimate how much disruption that is. For the most willing in the world, it's challenging. For anybody who's got children or any mental health issues or anything else, it really is hard, and we can't underestimate the difference that, although the difference it will make, the impact it's having on somebody short term. If we want to do engagement properly and we want people to come on board with these ideas, then we need to make it as simple as possible. So we've chose to focus on our void properties as well. Isn't very helpful for Welsh Government when they ask us for a list of properties that we're going to work on in the next 12 months, because very often we're not giving them addresses because we want to include these voids. But it does mean we get the opportunity to align it with other works that we're doing, and decarbonisation on that particular home in the least disruption as possible before the resident moves in. It does help with things like monitoring as well, because you're doing it before somebody else comes in and puts their decoration and that on it. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of cover on that bit as well, really, as the opportunity that we've used to do something other than a whole scale approach. So that property there has got solar PV, it's got next gen, and it's got a sun amp, all completely redecorated. Obviously, new kitchen, new bathroom, all the general void works that it needs, but it's done as a whole approach when the resident moves in. So moving on, what we're talking about today, challenges. My goodness, are there very many? You've already touched on the planning, but in addition to planning, we seem to have had a much bigger issue this year with ecological issues, and particularly our bat friends. the processes that we need to go through ahead of doing any works, even if there's no bat activity. We're taking a very cautious approach, but very sensible, I hope. But it has meant that it's put projects off. So we've done all the engagement, we've prepared everybody, we've done all the hard work in terms of residents and understanding the technologies and what we're going to put in there. And we've got all ready. And then as we've gone through the planning and planning process, we've then had to go through an ecological process. And even though there was no bats on site, for whatever reasons above and beyond my understanding, we then had to put the project on hold until the end of May or middle May. So that did mean it affected our ORP. It did make all the plans that we'd made with the residents and all the engagement. We're then going back and saying, hang on, we will be back, but there's just a slight delay in the meantime. So in terms of resident engagement, that's not particularly helpful, but unfortunately, it's one of the challenges that we have. I put the middle picture was actually one of the properties that we'd done a short while ago, which was a void property. So when it became void, we started working on it. Asbestos ceilings. Nobody's very keen to be covering up asbestos. So actually the cost of removing that asbestos ceiling, reboarding it before we put the next gen in there. Obviously, it's a good reason to possibly not change anything and leave things in situ. But unfortunately, we don't have that option. We've got to make some changes. And the top one is we've had some structural issues on perfectly good properties that we've had no issues with previously. But once you start looking at cavity wall, you've got the failed wall ties or the missing wall ties. We've played spot the wall tie at points. So there's a lot of additional costs that you don't necessarily know until you start doing the work on it. So contingency seems to be getting much bigger. In addition to the practical stuff I just talked about there, I'm sure we're not alone in finding the challenges of getting the balance between quality and quality assurance and cost. So obviously PAS absolutely champion the PAS process. We've all had experiences of things that have gone wrong historically. Now that's in place. It does give us a better control over things if it's done properly and monitored properly and assessed properly. Registration with Trustmark or a similar scheme absolutely provides some level of assurance. But I think the challenge that we found at the moment is that this is a little bit like years ago when estate agents started, we were required to do domestic energy assessment on properties, and estate agents were calling out for demand. Suddenly you have experts that are created overnight. Do they come with the experience and the knowledge and understanding they need to, or is it a new work stream for them? And how much assurance can that actually give us? So that takes quite a bit of management and quite a bit of understanding. So a very positive suggestion or intention actually comes with its own challenges itself. That's just to cover a few. In addition, I'm sure we've all said it a million times, supply chain. There aren't all of the contractors that we need to do all of the works we need when we all want it at the same time because we've all been allocated grant money. So yeah, huge challenge for us all, and we've talked about it, I'm sure you guys have as well, in many times in many different events, and I'm not sure how we completely overcome it, although I appreciate the hard work that Malcolm in Welsh Government's trying to do to help drive that as well. Okay, so the last one for me, can you see all three pictures there? I'm conscious my Zoom. Okay, let's do that. So unfortunately, I'm not going to sit here and give you all of the answers because I haven't got them. And we still have these challenges, and I'm sure we will continue to have these challenges for some time. We can all work together to try and improve them. But I guess for me, it was just about sharing how we've tried to deal with them or address them. If nobody could tell my team that I've put them on the screen, please, I'd be very grateful because I'm sure they won't be overly impressed when they see this. But yeah, for us, it's been about creating the right team to make sure we can drive this through. So I talk about retrofit assessors, retrofit coordinators, the three guys that we've got here. And I'll start with Kylie. Kylie comes from a housing background, so she was a Mellon housing officer for many years. She's got a lot of experience of the struggles that our residents may face. She knows a lot of our residents because she's been doing this for a very long time. Geographically, we cover 5 areas and she has rotated a few across a couple of those. She's obviously got really good relationships across Mellon and now will have in Hedyn too. So that helps us to be able to determine that. And she's got quite a lot of experience to bring. She's excellent in terms of communicating with residents. So what we've done is Kylie's now become a domestic energy assessor, and she's also done a retrofit assessor course. Kylie's not going to undertake those things, but she understands what's involved in doing them, what the information should look like, and how that's going to impact on the resident to explain what somebody's going to do when they come there and do a survey. So even though she's not using that qualification at the moment, she's got it, understands it, and can do. Kylie spends a lot of time on site with the other two guys there. So we've got Anthony in the middle. Anthony has come from our maintenance team, been a trainee surveyor. He has then moved on to be a decarb surveyor, and Anthony's done his retrofit coordinator as well. Ant's a project manager within the team. He's not going to be doing retrofit coordination for us. That's going to be done externally, but he is our kind of sense check and our audit for ourselves, to make sure that he fully understands the process and he's able to understand whoever's undertaking that for us. Excuse me, whoever's undertaking that for us is doing the job properly and he's got confidence in what they're delivering. Kylie spends a lot of time on site with Ant, so obviously picks up a lot of technical knowledge, again, to be sharing that with our residents. And then thirdly, we've got Callum, who's was a heating engineer with Mellon. Callum was with us for about 10 years as a heating engineer, took an interest in becoming a surveyor or looking at decarb, and has joined the team a couple of years ago on a trainee programme. As a decarb surveyor, or trainee decarb surveyor, I should say. So Callum's undertaken a lot of training, including his DEA and his retrofit assessor as well. And now Callum's able to start project managing alongside Ant, and delivering some of the projects. Again, coming from a maintenance background, Callum's got the technical experience, but he's also dealt with residents when he's visited their homes for the last 10 years. So again, we've got that resident experience built in within the team. We're never going to fix all of these things, are we? I can't change planning, I can't change bats, I can't change any of those, but we can try and make this as simple as possible for our residents, which is the bit that we can control and we can put the most effort into. Resident engagement, hugely important. As I say, it's very disruptive. People are taking time out of their lives. They may be taking days off work to allow us to go in and do this work. And we can't underestimate how much impact that will have. It doesn't mean that they've necessarily got holidays. We've got people still on 0-hour contracts or temporary contracts, or so when they're refusing access, we need to get to the bottom of why and truly understand if there's anything else that we can do to help to support them. We want to do this because it's the right thing to do, and from a decarb perspective, it's the right thing to do. But equally, especially something like installing NextGen for the very first time in properties, we need to understand we're not having a negative impact on our residents. Where we can put solar PV to offset it, brilliant. Where we can't, we need to understand the costs, because we could be in a position where we are making them worse off, absolutely unintentionally. So I think that's really important, and having these guys working very closely with the residents to understand that is hugely important for us. I think the other thing to say is, so going back, so I mentioned right at the beginning when we trialled the product in one of our sites that was a strategic void, we had lots of residents around there who were welcome to come in and have a look. Every time I popped up to site, somebody would say, "What are you doing over there?" and come in and have a look at the flat, turn it on, feel the heat, understand what it felt like, talk to them about the differences, and all those great things. So through our ORP experience, we were able to put cavity wall, we had failing cavity wall in these properties that were tenanted. So we were able to deal with the fabric issues first. And most recently, we're currently just about to finish a project where we've actually replaced the heat pumps in those properties, because those residents were used to heat pumps, they're off gas and they've always had them. They're coming to end of life, and we've been able to replace them with NextGen. Now, this is an over 55 scheme. I'm not a salesperson for NextGen, so I'm not going to pretend it's not disruptive. I've said it many times, and we have to accept this every single day, that we are making this very difficult on a scheme that's over 55s, on quite small flats as well, which doesn't give them the space to move around the house or get out the way for any period of time. And I think all of that initial engagement, that when we actually went up there to talk to the residents about what we would like to do, how we were going to do it, what products we were going to install, we were absolutely amazed of how enthusiastic they were. And that goes back to the original, is it the th stuff that you trialed? Oh, I felt that. I went in that room, I seen that. That was really great. I remember you guys being up here doing that. Oh, you did say you'd be back at some point, hopefully, if it worked. And obviously now I'm confident it works because you're coming back and putting it in our properties. So we've installed next gen Sunamp for the hot water solution, and we've also put PV. It is very early days. The first ones have been finished. We are finishing site very shortly, hopefully. And we've already had feedback off the residents of the differences cost them during this period. So the monthly drop in the energy bill. Now, I'm not going to start talking about stats because I think it's far too early. They've literally had it for the first few months. I want the team to work closely with them. We need the monitoring to give us the information we need as well. And we would say that it's summer, but let's be fair, we've had a very mixed approach to summer so far. And even in summer, these residents heat their properties as high as possible. And they've probably been the ones most challenged from the heat pump scenario because they can't do exactly what my mum and I'm sure plenty others have experienced and turn that thermostat onto 30 degrees for instant heat. So these guys have been used to having heat pumps and they have had challenges with it. They have lived with it. Have they embraced it? Absolutely. But it hasn't been easy. So even though we're coming in with a brand new technology, it's actually been incredibly successful, touch wood, so far. And I'm sure we'll be able to share that more in the future. Future challenges, the same as everyone else, all the same things again, I guess. Working together, making sure we do as much collaboration as possible on things like supply chain training, getting our staff in the position to be able to deal with this because we're going to be there long after the contractor. They're going to be our homes for a very long time and our residents, hopefully. And then for us, I guess, it's the merger challenge as well because we have different stock and we all need to understand how's best to take it forward. So, yeah, sorry, no ideal solutions to any of the challenges, but at least share how we're looking at it. So that's it for me.
Very well done, Trisha. Absolutely liked it. I think you've touched on some really important points from disruption to like tenant engagement, but also training all the staff. Because as you said, we all sort of need to have some basic knowledge when we sort of deal with tenants on what is a heat pump. Because if we don't know it, we can't really communicate with them. So some really important points, and using different technologies as well in a way which is less disruptive and finding solutions which makes our life easier, tenants' life easier, and everybody's life easier. So very well done. Thank you so much for your presentation there. Our next speaker for today is Allyn, Energy and Plant Services Manager at Ateb. People who know Allyn or follow Allyn on LinkedIn might know incredible work he's been doing to sort of reduce the bills for tenants, but also making sure that the homes are future ready with different solutions from sensors to heat pumps. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Allyn on what's happening at Ateb in terms of retrofit case studies. So over to you, Allyn, now.
Right, let's try and get this done first. To share my screen. Can we see that firstly? 2 seconds.
It's going
Can
to
we
take.
see that?
Yes, I can. Brilliant.
Fabulous. Right, good morning all. So get straight to it. Unlike Trisha, I have got a bit of a PowerPoint slide, unfortunately. So who are Ateb? So we're a West Wales Housing Association. We've got just under 3,300 properties. The majority of our stock was built post 1991. Currently got an average SAP rating of 79, and we've got just under 1,200 properties below that magic SAP 75 number. So overall, we're HA in particularly good condition, I want to say, in terms of energy efficiency. But we've got our own unique challenges based on a lot of it based on geography as well. So our optimized retrofit program. So Ateb's taken part in ORP 3. We didn't take part in any iteration before that, so not ORP 1 or 2. And our current grant allocation so far has been 3.7 million. So the key thing that we wanted out of ORP is to make ORP year 1 and year 2 a learning experience. We were, at the time anyway, we were a relatively new team in terms of planned and retrofit. And lots of the measures that we wanted to do or had to do, we had no experience in terms of Ateb. So we wanted to make it a learning experience, not just for us, but our contractors, our customers, and everything involved. We wanted to place customers basically at the heart of everything that we wanted to do as a project. Because of that as well, we employed specifically a customer engagement coordinator. So that 100% of that role was effectively to manage the customer's expectations, sit with customers, talk to customers purely around every single retrofit measure project that we were ever going to want to do and still do. So that has been for us the golden ticket. Without that person, Daniel, in place, we wouldn't have achieved half of what we've achieved in the last couple of years. So, as I said, we want to learn, use it as a learning experience with the view in ORP 3 year 3 to lodge with Trustmark, which we did successfully. Great, fantastic. And finally, we wanted to appoint local Welsh contractors within, hopefully, West Wales or Wales. We wanted to stimulate the local economy there as well in Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, because we do unfortunately suffer from not having enough contractor base because we're not on that M4 corridor. So we do struggle, not just for retrofit projects, but for all manner of repairs, standard kitchens, bathrooms, etc. So we really struggle in that area. So just a quick run on ORP. So we had to install environmental sensors for environmental management, energy monitoring. So what we did on our ORP, across the 3 funding years, we installed external wall insulation to all properties, so that we used the Rockwool 100mm Weatherby system, and we installed PV and battery to around about 52 properties, and we installed an average of 3.7 kilowatt generation and 4 kilowatt battery storage on average. So I'll just go to the first project. So the first project was in Park Avenue in Kilgetty. Again, this was our first project. So this is literally our first toe dip into the retrofit world. We learned a lot. We learned a lot in terms of not just fitting EWI, but all the associated works and costs associated with that, like fences, gullies, gutters, everything you can think of. Customers, TV, satellite, everything associated with that. So we learned a hell of a lot from this initial project, and as well how to manage customer expectations around the work itself. And if I'm honest with you, the customers did find it difficult at the start, because I think it was a learning journey for us. So we did have a project which was a huge learning curve for everybody involved. So the next 2 photographs are from our Braceli Court project and Garfield Gardens project. So on these 2 particular sites, we installed external wall insulation and PV and battery. And what we did here, we installed them in 2 different installation methods. So we used similar systems, we used similar inverters, different batteries, but with a very different approach in terms of external mounting and in an external cupboard. The idea behind this, we wanted to find the optimal solution for us as a HA in terms of how we want to install PV and battery going forward. And we've moved on a little bit from these installations as well. So this was really the first first roll of the dice. And what we are doing now is significantly different to what we were doing. But with these 2 systems, so in Braceli Court, we installed 46 solar panels combined. There was 19 kilowatt PV generation combined, and 28 kilowatt hour battery combined as well across 7 properties. So fairly large systems across very small 1 and 2 bedroom bungalows, and again with 100mm of Rockwool insulation as well. So this is the Garfield Garden project, which is one of the photographs around the inverter and battery on the previous slide. So we installed a grand total of 102 solar PV panels here, with a 32 kilowatt combined generation and 36 kilowatt combined storage. And again, as you can see with the photograph, our contractor Cardo installing the external wall insulation. Again, what we did learn from this project in particular is, and again, this project started shortly after the upgraded guidance around battery storage, again, with all the additional requirements around compartmentation, around the combustion, to do with the lithium batteries, etc. The additional cost to install batteries and inverters inside a home is steep, and we did undertake that on this site, and we've got a firm understanding of costs associated with that. On top of that as well, so for our customers, we put very large systems in these bungalows, and our customers are paying on average about £10 a month for their electricity, and that was in the winter. So these customers are saving a tremendous amount of money even in the winter period. So it was a fantastic project. Again, lots of different customer bases here, customers with mobility issues, customers with language barriers, etc. So Daniel, again, playing a key part to make sure that actually every customer bought into the program, bought into the project, and ultimately had a success at the end. Without that, and again, it's slightly more critical than maybe a surveyor or project manager. Without that person, we wouldn't have done 50% of what I'm showing you now. So this was a project we completed February time. So ORP 3 year 3. Again, thanks to Welsh Government, we were quite at pace, I want to say, for the end of the financial year to get all the projects done because of the funding requirements. But these two properties, or these two sites, sorry, are in Solva in West Wales. So the two streets right next door to each other, Maes Moor, Maes Canal. Again, quite unique geography setting, very rural, absolutely gorgeous views from these properties. And for us, these properties were just on the boundary of the parks, and so we had to get obviously explicit permission to fit EWI. But we learned a lot in terms of fitting the roofline closure system, which we've got on the left-hand side of Maes Canal, I believe that was. So on the top left there, we've got the new roofline closure system from Wetherby. Yes, there were historically lots of issues with roofline closure systems, but the new system, that's come out is a massive improvement. And again, it's part of the learning. We wanted to do a roofline closure system. We've done it in a controlled way with a limited amount of properties. We've made sure that system, has been double, triple checked by everybody that needs to. And again, lots of learning around that particular site. So again, ORP 3 year 3. And again, you can see from the bottom left-hand photo, our solar PV has moved on slightly in terms of how we're installing it. But this is Stonecourt and Fun and Wen in West Wales. And we've gone for larger systems again. We wanted to push the boundaries of generation and storage, and on these two particular sites we have. So on average, we've got 5 kilowatt generation per property, and we've got 10 kilowatt storage capacity per property. So we've done this for a particular reason. We wanted to prove a concept that actually, we can have customers not having an energy bill or electricity bill. We've got 28 properties that we've done or installed these systems to, and it's been an absolute huge success. I'll show you why. So there's Dan, the key Daniel on our team there, interviewing one of our customers, Val. We've had a snippet of one of the customers' energy bills there for April, and on average they're paying £0.01 a day for their electricity. We wanted to push the bounds of the generation. We did come across, or we did not obstacles, but we came across certain challenges around the grid, around export capacity. So we did have to have quite lengthy conversations with National Grid. Our contractors had to have lengthy conversations with National Grid as well. So it didn't come without challenges, but we were able to undertake the project in its full and get the outcome that we hope for, which is customers effectively, not in the dead of winter, but close enough, paying extremely low amounts for their electricity. So our ORP journey from year 1 to 3 of ORP 3 has been a massive learning curve. But what we wanted to do right at the end of that project or process was undertake something a little bit more complex. So we move on now to Harvard Close. So Harvard Close is a site just outside Haverfordwest, and what we were very, very fortunate to get additional funding through the Swansea Bay City deal, the HAPS program, Homes as Power Stations. So what we wanted to do is again push the concept of max generation or max storage even further, and push it to a point where we wanted to make sure, or wanted to try and get energy bills as low as possible, not just electricity, but for heating as well. So again, with a combination of ORP grant, Swansea Bay City deal and Ateb's own investment as well. So it's just over £500,000. That's a lot of money for 8 properties. So we've got 8 properties on site that we owned, with one that was privately owned. So that came with its own unique challenges as well. So we were going to do a holistic retrofit project, utilising lots of different funding streams. So our objectives effectively to trial innovative technology for the first time in social housing, minimise compliance requirements. So we've got a large DLO internally, both heating team and electrical team. We wanted to minimise their need for compliance to return to the property to undertake anything. We wanted to make properties cheaper for customers. Ultimately, that's what we want. And we want to improve the SAP rating, and ultimately as well, and this is a big goal for us, is to remove oil and LPG from our stock. So these properties were all oil heated, and that's a big internal marker that we have to remove those heating systems. So again, that's just a typical layout of one of the properties there. There's a mixture of 2-beds, 3-bed houses, and a 4-bed bungalow as well. So that's the couple of photos of the properties before any of the works. Again, nothing, too different from lots of other HAs. So what work did we undertake? So all the properties had new roofs. We installed external wall insulation, again, following on from ORP, and we used our ORP grant to do that. We had full domestic rewires to incorporate a wide variety of new technologies. We upgraded the actual wet system itself. So we all installed larger pipework, so 22mm pipework, with K3 radiators throughout. So the larger radiators again. We installed a sun amp, but we wanted to push the bounds of sun amp. We didn't want to just install it for hot water or anything else. We've actually used it in a dual sense, where the sun amp does supply hot water to the property, but it also preheats the water for the heat pump. So in essence, the heat pump isn't working as hard, doesn't use as much energy. So we had lots of very technical conversations with both Worcester Bosch and Sunamp to achieve that. And the systems that we do have on site are very unique. These systems don't exist anywhere else in the UK. And again, we installed quite a large 7 kilowatt Worcester Bosch heat pump. We pushed the bounds again with the PV. We installed 16 panels. Some have 17 or 18 panels as well on the properties. We installed a My Eddy diverter as well, which is effectively a little brain for the system. And again, we've installed a Solar Edge 10 kilowatt hour battery. So a huge amount of technology in 8 properties. And again, just going on the back of what Trisha said around disruption, we were effectively turning customers' homes upside down, and we completely understood that, and we approached that in a way where we were quite open with customers. We had constant dialogue around the program of works. Some customers, one of the customers in particular, had a disabled daughter, so we had to be very open and transparent in terms of how we were going to do the works in that particular property. And again, it was that constant dialogue, but without a customer engagement coordinator, Dan, we wouldn't have achieved, again, this project. It's due to its complexity, even though it's a very small amount of properties. So again, just some of the photos. So with the Worcester Bosch heat pump, and again, effectively within the property, it's a mini plant room. We've got the wall hung unit, the control unit, and we've got the slightly out the shot down the bottom, the sun amp. So these properties do now have effectively a mini plant room in their homes. So again, just touching on the solar PV element, we've moved on in terms of how we now, and this is now our preferred method. So we've installed the PV inverter, battery, control units, etc., in a self-contained unit away from the property. 1, for maintenance reasons. 2, it doesn't affect any EWI or anything externally to the building. 3 as well, it just adds a level of safety, I think, as well. You're not exposing any of the electrical switchgear, parts, etc., to anybody, children kicking a ball, anything, dogs, or animals. So this is now our preferred method. We had these cages, specially made from Germany, shipped over But thankfully now we have managed to source these locally in Ammanford in South West Wales. But again, these were bespoke in nature. And as a one-off project, we're extremely happy in the way these have turned out. And for maintenance reasons, as you can imagine, our DLO are over the moon where they can access everything external to the property with very little need to go in the customer's home. So these are some of the final shots from the project in terms of, I'm not a fan of the green personally, but the actual finish on the properties themselves, it's night and day in terms of how these properties now look, how these properties operate. Taking customers off oil has been a challenge. It has been something that we didn't expect to be as complex as it was. We had customers, and again, we didn't find this out till later on towards the end of the project, customers obviously saving every month for their oil. And as we brought them off oil, and obviously they had their energy bills, continuing to save for oil because they were so entrenched in that behavior in terms of saving. And then we didn't find out till after that actually, and having those conversations.
Technical error
I
there.
think
Allyn is freeze.
Alan's frozen, yeah.
Previous properties, they've always had oil as their main source of heating. So we have struggled, again, it's a big learning curve for us. We didn't think it would be a central issue that we would need to deal with, but we have learned that from that as well. But it's been a fantastic project where
Oh, there's a glitch again. Apologies, everyone. I think just the nature of the world these days, but is he back again?
oh,
Alan,
sorry,
lost
Allyn,
you.
is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, Allyn, we lost you for a minute.
apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Apologies.
No problem.
Can you see my screen still? Well, so just onto the energy bills, or the outcome effectively from the Haverclose project. And Steve from number 9 in Haverclose has been willing to share these photographs and for this purpose. So on the right is Steve's phone. So we've had the Solar Edge app installed on Steve's phone because he the customers can constantly monitor the generation and usage from the battery. And that's one of the reasons why we went with Solar Edge in the first place. And these are a couple of screenshots effectively that Steve wanted us to share, where even in the middle of February, and these customers are paying on average, £1.30, £1.40 on average per day for their energy. That's a staggeringly low amount considering their entire system, heating, energy consumption, food preparation is all electric based. Customers are paying, I believe Steve was paying around about £40-50 in the winter period. Now in the summer, he's actually generating an income because he's changed tariff as well, etc. So and again, it's moving on from the previous concept that we had in terms of lowering not just the electrical energy bill, but the whole energy bill. Customers are now actually generating an income in the summer months and obviously paying very small amounts in the winter months. So it's been a huge learning curve for us. We wanted to prove a concept with both funding models. And for us, it's now will be our go-to option effectively because we're making a massive difference to customers and they can see that in their energy bills at the end of it. Even though granted, there are lots of complexities with installing this amount of tech, from cost to disruption, and to just general habits as well in terms of payments, in terms of how they use their systems. So we've learned a massive amount within the last couple of years. So I just wanted to touch on our monitoring. So, and again, it's not just ORP, it's HAPS, it's everything. So we are installing IOP monitoring systems as a standard, not just on ORP, because the data we get out of them, and I'll show you why now, is exceptional. So why do we choose IOP? Non-intrusive, extremely low installation times, wide variety of sensors, and we've got instant access to data. And the customers also have an app, which is great. So we install sensors in living rooms, bedrooms. We got heat flow sensors on the flow and return. We've got energy monitoring sensors as well, and a wide variety of electrical circuits. So across our RP program, we've got 750 sensors installed currently, across about 125 properties, and we've got 6 gateways then, 12 gateways, sorry, across all the stock. So the gateways effectively connect to the LoRaWAN network, requires no SIM, there's no ongoing cost for us, and that's why we chose IOP effectively. So again, nice and easy to install. They give us fantastic data. It takes our DLO or our contractors around about an hour at best to install each one, and that's with a good conversation to the customer as well. So yeah, really simple, really straightforward for us. With IOP, we're able to really measure the impact that we're making. And again, this is just some of the customer feedback we've had, but we can back up their statements with hard factual data. You know, we can back up the fact that Val pays £10 a month on average. We've got that. We have that in the data. We have had some really unintended benefits with this system as well. This is one of the reasons why we've chosen to roll it out even further. So during the early days of ORP, we unfortunately had somebody drive into one of our homes on our ORP project, cause severe structural damage in the middle of the night. But actually, the sensors picked that impact up. When I say the impact, it picked up when our out of hours team and other consultants attended in the middle of the night. So we were able to really narrow that time frame down, because the customer was quite confused by the situation. She was elderly. We were able to narrow that time period down for our insurers and for everybody involved. And again, it was something that was a little bit unexpected, and we didn't really turn to IOP to look at that data. We just naturally came across that data. So that was one really unintended benefit, but it was quite a unique situation, and yeah, we're glad we were able to narrow that down. For us, the monthly reports from IOP have been exceptional. We now use that as a staple in our monthly damp and mold groups, and we're trying to integrate that further into our housing management system currently. The level of data that it does give us is it is exceptional. So again, another reason why we want to roll that out further. And this particular example as well, we have a home energy officer. We have noticed on a lot of properties that actually some energy usage before any measures are extremely high compared to other properties within those estates. So we have had the opportunity to send out a home energy officer just to sit down with customers, just for them, for us to understand basically, and them to understand why that is happening. And we've seen a massive reduction in those properties, in those visits. The home energy officers have gone to a huge reduction even before measures have been installed. And finally, we've installed sensors in properties that are challenging for us, especially in West Wales. Lots of listed, lots of conservation areas, lots of parks areas, and we found it very useful in terms of planning retrofit as well. And that's even before we understand the issues fully. So huge help IOP has been. The data that we get is critical for us to plan retrofit going forward. And I think without good data, we can't make good decisions. So what's next for Ateb? So again, it's for us, it's challenging. We are geographically restricted in lots of different ways. But Ateb have made a commitment, and it's been announced today on social media, that we do plan on investing £37 million over the next 3 years. The majority of that being on energy efficiency measures. And again, a large bulk of that is made up of new money that we've received from Welsh Government. So we are planning on upscaling our retrofit projects dramatically over the next couple of months. So hopefully we can make a huge difference again by rolling out some of the measures that we've already done over the last couple of years. But I think for us, and again, I just want to really reiterate this, the biggest learning curve we've had internally is those customer engagement coordinator, or TLO, as to use old terminology. That has been instrumental, and without that role, we wouldn't have achieved anywhere near what we have. There's nothing better than having somebody as their job to sit down with customers and just have a cup of tea and a biscuit to explain an issue. And that's all, that's one of my biggest takeaways is it's great looking at a problem from a technical property perspective, but actually you do need to look at the human side of it as well. And that is absolutely critical. And that's why I think we've had so much success as well in our projects, because we've put that forefront and we've made that critical to the process. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Allyn. Really, really good presentation. You've covered pretty much all the points around net zero, especially the human side of it. I think that's the common theme from Trisha and Allyn's
I
presentation.
apologize for my internet connection. I'm sorry about
No
that.
worries. I think that's natural, part of life, really. But very well covered presentation, but also the importance of having a dedicated person and the importance of monitoring. Another theme which was covered yesterday, the importance of sensors from ACO to IOPT, all of these sensors really impacting and creating a benefit in all our lives. But really coming back to the point of making it aware and educating tenants on what are those. But without any further delay, I'd like to introduce our third speaker for today, Robert Hill from British Gas. He's been working for 24 years with Welsh Gov, currently working on the NEST scheme, delivering that energy efficient improvements to homeowners, to private rental space. And I think it's really interesting to have him on this conversation today. So over to you, Robert.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Let me hopefully share my screen.
I think I can still see Allyn's screen. Thanks, Allyn.
Thank you. Yeah. So, like I say, from myself, we obviously British Gas, and we run the NEST scheme for the Welsh government. We were awarded that contract back in April 2024. So basically, from today, I'd like to share you our challenges and our sort of like learning curve that we've done over the last sort of 14 to 15 months on the scheme, and how the sort of scheme started from the beginning, and with the sort of regulations, if you like, in the scheme rules, and how that's changed over that period, working with Welsh government, etc., and seeing our sort of findings and what we were coming across, and how the scheme could, I suppose, how it would evolve going forward over a short period of time, and how it will evolve going forward as well. So if I just, so there's just a bit of a timeline for yourselves around, like I said to yourself, the timelines of the event. We were awarded the contract back in April 24. We saw a mobilized period of 3 months, 3 to 4 months around getting the contract up, and ultimately engaging with installers, etc. We are working with Sero as well, as they're our retrofit coordinator. So one of the stipulations from the Welsh government was the retrofit coordinator had to be independent from ourselves. They would make obviously the final decisions or measures that could be possible for the properties, and obviously working closely with themselves. We did then start to look at work, and obviously commencing work from July. Again, working with producing sort of MTIPs, which is the medium-term improvement plans that they would produce for us. And then if you look at, obviously, the first sort of install was October. So that period of, sort of 6 to 8, 9 months, that I think gives you an appreciation of trying to get this off the ground. We were new into PAS. We had obviously understanding of PAS previously. We had run the NEST scheme for the Welsh government from 2011. But obviously we were introduced to PAS from April. And again, I think it's safe to say everyone who works in NEST has now got a very better understanding of PAS and what the I wouldn't say challenge. Well, I think we all agree on the call, the purpose of PAS and why it's being rolled out and obviously introduced into big contracts, etc., which we totally agree with. But I think to try and get your heads an understanding of the different levels of processes that are required, even taking the most experienced persons working on the scheme, taking them back, and it's taken a good period of time to understand what's required from obviously your initial retrofit assessment down to doing condition reports, having the customers understanding on average, our first initial assessments are taken on average around about 3, 4, 5 hours on properties. Then you've got obviously the retrofit coordinator comes into play. Then you've got the designs that is a process within PAS. Then working with installers, and then obviously then getting onto the actual installation of the works. It's a process which is not to be underestimated, which we'll understand on the call. So if you look at the sort of challenges we were faced with, and it's been spoken about already, around the air source heat pumps and around the restrictions of the 3 meter rules. I think it's important to understand, obviously, with ourselves that over 80% 85% of the properties we go to are owner occupiers, and they are one-off properties. We haven't got I suppose I will say on the call, the luxury of having sites, etc., and properties just obviously confined in one space, and obviously being on estates, etc. They're one-off properties throughout the whole of Wales, and we go to all different types, as you can imagine, of properties. So when we're looking at air source heat pumps, the restrictions we had was obviously the planning permission for the 3 meter. We had properties physically you cannot fit air source heat pumps in. We had obviously the same I suppose understanding as yourselves around customers as well. What we had obviously as well, there was no alternative heating measures available at the time. So it was only air source heat pumps when we first started the scheme. But we quickly found that a lot of the properties weren't suitable, or customers weren't looking to have air source heat pumps at this particular time. Another obviously challenge as well is like around about 9% of the properties worlds, I think we've understood this over the period of time, are in a poor standard as regarding to PAS. The remedial works that we were identifying, obviously measures were being installed. We didn't initially have any budgets as well agreed with the Welsh Government for remedial costs. Now working with them over this period, it's been agreed that we get a threshold of 10%. Obviously, as it equates to, again, if we're looking at, it's just an example there, obviously 30,000, we can get around about £3,000 of remedial costs, which again, people on the call will appreciate doesn't go too far. So again, we have properties that potentially could benefit from measures, but because they fall out of the remedial costs, we can't progress them because of obviously, again, restrictions on costs. I think something that I'm not quite sure if you are aware, but we have got additional targets, including the Welsh Government contract as well. So what we have to achieve when we are looking at properties, we have to have an EPC increase of 2.5 bands on average, depending on where the property starts. So properties themselves have to have a SAP rating of 68 or less. What you find is obviously if you drop down the SAP scores, less SAP score, the more you would require to get to the 2.5 bands in SAP points. So you're finding you need more measures to install to achieve the 2.5 band increases. Fuel cost savings, we had to try and achieve 20% as well of the costs, and carbon savings of 15%. Like we've said, 90% of them obviously are privately owned. And we get 10% of landlord properties as well. And again, that don't obviously go back to the conditions. It doesn't matter, to be perfectly honest, if they're owner occupier or landlord properties, we're finding that they're all in similar conditions. And as we said, the high level of cancellations or retrofit due to remedial costs being obviously the 10% of the thresholds targets. what solutions we've introduced over this period of time. We've worked with Welsh Government, and they've obviously agreed themselves to drop the targets. So from 20% to 12%. What that did allow us to do was obviously more properties did qualify because they did achieve the target set by the Welsh Government. I think it's important why the government put the targets in. I think they do need to get, obviously, money that they're spending. They do want to try and get benefits for the property, but for themselves and customers, that the measures that we are fitting are worthwhile, and we are getting, or the customers ultimately are benefiting from the returns as regenerating from sort of things like solars, etc. We have removed the individual carbon savings, or the Welsh Government agreed to do this, so it's an average per month. So again, that did free up more properties to qualify for the scheme. What we have agreed with Welsh Government is to hold customers on the air source heat pumps as well, so they could benefit once the 3 meter rule has been lifted. And it says, obviously, we hope the rule change year is 2026. Hopefully that is the case. Then we can then revisit. So what we are doing is, for example, we going back, for instance, we may fit things like solar PV and perhaps potentially new windows and doors, and then we will go back and do the air source heat pump once the 3 meter restriction has been lifted. Contractors that we do now employ, it's obviously a best way, one of the way to explain them really is a one-stop shop. So they do complete all the measures for us. They're multi-skilled. We're conscious of trying to work with the retrofit coordinator, working with different installers to plan the works. So we quickly, again, identified in the startup of the scheme that sort of contractors that we needed would be to a certain size. They had the capacity and the necessary sort of skill set, or have the investment for the skill set to do all measures that we offer within the scheme. We do complete audits at all stages of the job as well, and inspect at completion. So that's 100% inspections. That's completed by our British Gas qualified inspectors, and audits are covered out by ourselves, by our contract delivery managers, CDMs, and what we have got as well, the Welsh Government have got a third-party auditor called Pennant and Choice. They do cover off audits and on-site inspections or desktop inspections at each stage of the journey. We have a weekly interface session with Sarah, which, as I said to you previously, is our retrofit coordinator. They are obviously independent. The retrofit coordinator, obviously, as I would say, would make the decision on the measures that we can fit to the property, and they will obviously look at the conditional reports, etc., that we produce for them, and they look at the risk of that property and whether or not it can benefit from measures, and make the final call on whether that property can progress or not, or recommend remedial costs, as I mentioned, that we have now got a budget for, and whether them remedial costs obviously come within the scheme requirements, and then we can progress that property and then start speaking to customers around the measures that are offered. Another thing which was big for ourselves is that the Welsh Government agreed to install gas boiler heating systems from the 1st of April 2025, where no obviously air source heat pump can be installed. This will start to reduce obviously things like windows and doors and other measures that we were looking to add to try and reach the targets. I think it's important thing as well, we do a crisis which they've identified, the Welsh Government. It's slightly different from this scheme, but we're looking at people that have got no heating or water, are very vulnerable. We still offer that for customers as well. I think the Welsh Government took a view on to that it's not something that you can turn people onto air source heat pumps overnight, etc. It's a phased return, and we have to take vulnerable vulnerable people within obviously our within Wales, around looking at the aspect of obviously vulnerability and so looking to fit gas boilers. On average, we can get back out to these properties within 5 to 10 working days and fit in new heating boilers for them, which helps massively when they're vulnerable, especially in the height of winter, etc. That's I know, short and sweet for myself. I think the learnings and the challenges that we've picked up, I think from ourselves is PAS itself. It's something that processes need to be followed. It's around customers. It's around the education of customers. I think the challenge we've got with customers is that we are going into properties and we are offering certain types of measures, but it's getting the buy-in from themselves. People, obviously, the previous speakers have already alluded to around the disruption. Customers are very reluctant, and we have age range you can imagine from all types of ages, and that said, we find it from all age groups that sometimes it's the reluctancy to have the disruption and have the new technologies. They're quite used still to their oil, their gas, their boilers, and they want to have the same sort of technology. So if we find that something there different, what we do have retrofit retrofit assessors, which are heating engineers and do have a lot of experience working on the scheme previously. So they're our persons who go out and sit down and have the meaningful conversation with these customers around the benefits of the measures that we can offer. So yeah, that's things we do. I think one of the things from ourselves as well is the changes from PAS. So that was coming into play, obviously, from I think it was April or March of this year. It was more data capture, which meant no longer properties as well. It can be up to around 30 minutes per property. And we obviously had to alter our sort of floor plans and work with that. And obviously we got future impacts as well in SAP 10 coming out in June next week, actually. So again, that's more changes to the infrastructure that we are working to with Welsh Government. So apart from obviously EPCs are going to be very, obviously effective with more data capturing from this month, and then obviously we've had the changes with PAS as well, which was obviously a few months ago. Just some volume, of since October, what we've looked to do. So we've completed over 600, as you can see there, 73 retrofit assessments. 230 further retrofit assessments are planned at our planning stage. There's 536 cancelled due to no measures, property not suitable. It's a really high cancellation rate, which we are working with, as I've said, both Welsh Government, Zero, customers to drive that down, and we are finding it is going in the right direction, and more people are really benefiting from the scheme. Installed measures over 200 properties since go obviously live in May. Together, obviously we worked to plan over, as he says there, 800 measures planned. Together we've worked and planned and we've installed over 800 measures, and the breakdown is here for yourselves to see the breakdown of what we've installed to properties. Happy to discuss things like EWI. Someone may pick up on things like external wall insulation. What we are finding the challenge we've got is because we potentially go into properties, we have to extend roofs, etc. for EWI. We've got dress stones. We just haven't got it within the budget as regarding remedial costs to affect EWI as such. Again, it's ongoing discussions with Welsh Government around how we can affect more properties. But that said as well, external wall insulation and internal wall insulation. There's a lot of risk involved with that as well to the property, and obviously Sero have their reasons why sometimes they are not recommended because of the risks to the property. Yeah, and that's the presentation from myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Some really big challenges there, but you've clearly found a way for some of them, and I hope you'll find for the rest. Really nice presentation there, but just conscious of the time, should we start with some questions? Because I think we had about 2 to 3 questions on the similar line. David, if you could help me find the question for Allyn. I think it was just
Right.
at the very start for... Yeah, so it was from David Jones, Allen. For the benefit of non-technical participants, could you explain the issues with EWI roofline closure systems? I think that's a question raised for about 3 times in this conversation.
What is a closed roof line system?
So effectively where so if I take it back a couple of years, EWI predominant, and again it was well publicized with the Arbed scheme and other schemes alike as well, where a roofline closure system effectively is installed. So what that is, where the actual roofline itself, so where the tiles, the guttering system and everything associated with the end of the property. So when that is tight to the actual external of the building itself, and instead of extending the roof or extending the tiles and associated roof itself, the system, the EWI, was fitted directly to the external wall with historically a plastic mesh on top, and unfortunately usually just a silicon bead between the actual external of the building and the EWI and the closing system on top. Unfortunately, that just was never going to be suitable. The silicone and other sealant that was used does break down over time. Anything externally around, if you're relying just on a silicone bead or something similar, unfortunately, sun will degrade it. So the new roofline closing system from Weatherby is slightly different. It ties into the building slightly differently. I have attached a link to one of the questions that was asked in the chat, so you can have a look at that system. And again, the new system is all PAS approved. It's all had its checks done as well. So it's a very different system to what was previously used, but effectively it's used, and again, you see it probably more in the South Wales valleys, end terraces, etc., where it's just effectively bolted onto the side on the gable end. But it's something that the industry has strayed away from for a number of years until there was a more a sharper sort of a system, which Weatherby and other manufacturers have now got, and it is approved. So yeah, I hope I've explained that. If not, I can put stuff in the chat, and yeah.
Of course, I think that's going to be
Yeah.
really helpful because I'm conscious a lot of people had to leave. So if we could sort of add that in our follow-up email, that would be great. And also, you've given me a good idea to make a video as well on this topic. So we'll be on it as well. A question from Robert as well, from Susanna. How do you sort of see SAP 10 rollout from 15th of June affect the NEST scheme?
To be fair, as regarding for ourselves, not too much. I mean, there's certain more data capture around room and roofs, etc. But we, as retrofit assessors, and completing doing retrofit assessments, we capture things like window data, etc. So I think it's a big change for people going out and doing, say, EPCs for state agents, etc. out there and the industry. But for people who have been familiar to doing retrofit assessments, a lot of the stuff that's being introduced to SAP 10 is already in the retrofit assessment methodology and doing EPRs. So not massive change, but it's still more data capture. Not on every property, because not every property obviously has rooms and roofs or basements, etc. But there are slight changes, and as I say, big for the industry and for your standard DEA, who goes out and does your standard EPC, but not so much for retrofit assessors.
Thanks, Robert. That was really helpful. And another one for Trisha as well. Are Hedyn using terms like ORP, retrofit, net zero with tenants, or have you thought of better alternatives? You're on mute.
Sorry, I couldn't find my I couldn't come off mute then. Yeah, a combination of all of them really. We are using ORP because we're talking about how it's been funded. To explain it's a bigger scheme than just us popping in to do something. But we're using the terms around the improvements we're trying to do to our property. So if we do mention something like ORP or not so much net zero, if I'm honest, but in the ORP is just the context of actually there's a programme at Welsh Government are helping to fund this kind of work that we're doing at the same time as the work that we're doing on your property anyway. Not so much net zero, if I'm honest. And we tend to shy away from talking about bills as well, because as much as we want to guarantee it does it, you can't. We've had properties where we're saying, look, this could be better, or could be cheaper for you, but actually we've got residents that don't even turn the heating on, and we can't turn up and say a brand new heating system is going to save you a fortune. Yes, insulating the property is going to make it more comfortable. If you're not putting the heating on, then obviously that's going to improve it. And we want to encourage them too to be turning the heating on. But yeah, we're very conscious about the terminology. Definitely ORP, but only to explain where the money's come from.
Yeah, I think very well put. I think it's very important to be honest in setting the expectations right? Because you can't have savings in every property, but you might be consuming less energy, which is another theme we might have discussed in our Pulse in our last conversation. But a very important point raised by Amanda as well we've discussed a lot about different technologies today, from Sanam to SoulShare to batteries, but how are these being recycled? Because Amanda, as she says, they're reaching to the end of life and might be replaced at some point. How much is it viable financially and considering the environmental impact? So, are we looking in some recycling process, or is it far too far at the minute?
I think we should be, definitely, yeah. And we have had lots of conversations across a couple of our housing associations, actually, even things like solar PV. We've put a lot of solar PV on previously, and we're not taking them off at the moment because they're still within their life. But there is going to get a point where the ones that have been put on previously, they do need to be recycled. And there are some schemes or some organisations starting doing it. But I think it is a really good point, and actually something we could probably all look at collectively about how are we going to do this stuff. If we're putting them in now, then that's great because we're not going to replace them for a period of time, but we should be considering that before we start it. Something like a boiler, you're going to have elements that are going to be recycled and scrap metal and the same that happens with everything else, but there are going to be other elements, this technology that isn't, and Sunam's a really good example of that. Probably something we need to talk to them about.
Totally.
Can I jump in, Akshat, as well?
Yeah, of course.
I've been tracking solar panels, because solar panels, many have got years ahead of them, so there hasn't been any recycling put in yet because there's still lots of time in them. But people like the French have got some really cool ways of recycling and stripping all the assets out of solar panels. In the UK at the moment, there's various places in the UK where the glass part of it effectively is crushed into a sand for building materials. But I'm in conversation with Welsh Government people. I've got a weird, I think it came from these sessions in the past where people have asked about it. I've got this weird interest now in how we recycle this stuff. So future session, hopefully, or maybe this time next year, I could do something on that. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. But just on the point which Alan mentioned earlier on the self-contained boxes, that leads to the question which we've got just now on the amount of space these kids take. Like even installing a heat pump is like, using a lot of space in your home, and clearly a lot of conversation with tenants is about the importance of storage and how these technologies are disruptive, but at the same time taking a lot of space. So is it quite substantial? Is that an issue you've sort of encountered with tenants? And are there any storage solutions you've sort of seen?
I think from our Harvard Close project, again, it was one of the reasons why we wanted to look at innovative ways of installing the PV and battery systems. And it was one of the main reasons why, as well as maintenance, we wanted to install them in self-contained cabinets outside. But granted, there is a storage requirement internally. Again, one of the reasons why we picked Harvard Close, they had multiple internal small cupboards that we could use. But again, on the smaller flats, etc., smaller properties, it will become a challenge. And I think, yes, this kit does take up quite a bit of room depending on your property type. But I think, we need to start looking at more innovative ways of installing this technology. I think new builds, effectively, they are especially some of the new builds I've seen internally with us at Ateb, previously at Pobble. They're building their own self-contained plant rooms almost separate to the homes as well going forward. So I just think as we develop and as everybody goes on this journey, there will be their own unique bespoke solutions per property.
Anything from Trisha here?
Yeah, it's about the right equipment and the right technology for the right property, isn't it? And we're not going to be able to replicate absolutely everything in every property. And actually, in the one where I mentioned the most recent one we've done, where we've done the cavity wall, they had a heat pump in there, which obviously was external, but there was some internal. There was a absolutely huge cylinder. They've got a fantastically, for a small flat, they've got a fantastically huge storage room within the kitchen. And that was completely overtaken by this huge cylinder that had been in there for a very long time. And actually, by putting the sun amp in there, it's a tiny box in the corner, and they absolutely ecstatic that they've got all this room back. The PV and exactly what Alan said is an external box outside means that the battery and that doesn't impact on it. And they've ended up with more space in theirs. So yeah, we've just got to pick the right technologies for the right spaces. New build is absolutely brilliant when you're given a blank page and able to do it. Retrofit, not so easy.
Definitely. I think that was the reason to have this conversation as well today, because retrofits are the most big challenge when it comes to decarbonization. But just conscious of the time, just the last question, and then we can sort of close this discussion. And it's a positive one, to be honest. How do you sort of enable tenants to take this opportunity to learn these new skills, these trades, understanding the importance of green skills, the opportunity there? How do you encourage them? How do you sort of spread the word about it?
We've got an employment team within our income and inclusion team, which we engage with quite a lot. They try and look for opportunities for them to volunteer. And then from a community benefits perspective, something that we absolutely hugely lucky to have in Hedyn now, which we didn't have in Mellyn, was actually a community benefit team who were going to be dedicated. We didn't have that resource previously, and we just tried to do the best we could through procurement and through encouragement, putting community benefits in and engaging with the contractors to offer opportunities to our residents where possible. Actually, we've got the benefit of having an entire team now that was in Newport City Homes previously, who will carry on doing it for all of us in a much more structured way. So yeah, that could be all kinds of community benefits, including that job opportunity, work placement, training opportunities. Yeah, we've just got to keep engaging with contractors to give us that chance to do it. We've got to also be giving them a constant stream of work, which doesn't help when funding stops and starts, although I've got to say it has been a lot better over the last few years. Because they then can start building up a workforce. So that's the way we need to do it, mainly driven through procurement, I think.
Definitely. No, that's a very good answer there. But we've got another one from Susanna. She says, could community heat networks with sub-metering be one solution for the storage we just raised in our last question on the storage issue with these new tech? Could that be a solution, do you guys think? Allyn, Trisha, Robert, any thoughts there?
Yeah, again, I think it in terms of a solution, it entirely depends on the properties and estates that you're working in. And I think going back to Trisha, I don't think every single property within a certain housing stock will have the same measures and have the same installation method. So I think it is a very bespoke, unique approach to each site. If we ever replicated have a close, it will look very different, even though it will follow the similar theme. So I think you need to take things with a pinch of salt. I think every project is slightly different. And yet, every option's on the table.
True that.
Can I jump in on that as well?
Yeah.
Community heat networks are truly amazing in parts of Europe, as in it's just mind-blowing what the Scandinavians have achieved in this. We don't have the greatest reputation in the UK, not because of one or two schemes that didn't do well, didn't price well, or the tenants didn't work. And it's a couple of individual ones, but it's given I think it's tainted a number of great networks in the UK, or it's stopped some great ones getting off the ground in the UK. And so we've got a media that doesn't really understand it and things like that. It's a shame, because I think that the opportunities for heat networks going forward in the future, like the Scandinavians, the Germans, the others have done, are really inspiring. We'll see how it goes. That's my personal opinion.
No, I think that's the whole point of Net Zero Week, right? Just to sort of explore different solutions and what possibly we can do next time. But honestly, what an engaging conversation. Apologies for running out of time as well. Just I'm so sorry for that. But thank you to our lovely speakers. We had some insightful conversation, challenges, solutions. Just a reminder, we've got an afternoon session at 2 p.m. With speakers from England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So I'd highly recommend you coming there as well. But thank you again for joining us this morning, and I hope to see you in the afternoon. Thanks again to our speakers, and hope to see you in next sessions as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to close the room then. Okay,
We'll run the session, the recording, and put it on the Padlet if
perfect.
anyone else.
Thank you.